then I'll play a little intro in about a minute, and there's a minute and 20 seconds left. So let me just start sharing this to all different channels here while we have this minute to wait. I will share on to all the pages I manage. This countdown is awesome.
Yeah.
Great little tool here.
Keeps you on track, right?
It does keep me on track too. Share to debate. And then one more share. Yeah, we got 5 people already lining up that they're waiting for whatever's going to happen in about 56 seconds. So this is good. Nick Bradley, I hope you're ready to introduce yourself to a whole bunch more people. All right. So there's about a minute, 44 seconds left. Oh, whoa, we're getting close. All right. I think it's time for me to play the intro here. So let me do the intro. Close. The intro's almost done. And it's time to debate, my friend. Alright. Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Sabo Shen with Vape Exhale. I am joined today by my good buddy, Nick Bradley. Nick Bradley is the GM of Herbs Medicinal Dispensary down in San Jose. One of the best dispensaries in the South Bay, or maybe just in Northern California, or California altogether. And the reason why I asked Nick to join us today was that, man, compliance has been a bitch. Has been a bitch for so many companies to just try to get things passed. It's also been really difficult for patients to get the medicine that they need. So I thought, who better than to bring along a GM of a dispensary to talk about all the things that are going on in our industry, with the patients, with the licensed producers, with the manufacturers. Nick, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
How's it going, everybody?
Well, we will not hear the audience respond, but I'll just say we're doing great. Anyway, so Nick, before we begin, I always like to ask people, what was your story to even get into the cannabis industry, and what was the positive benefit that you got from it?
So I've been lucky enough to have a very progressive family, and they were very open about cannabis use and the benefits of cannabis through my childhood. And when I went into the Marine Corps, one of my lifelong mentors was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and was actually one of the first 100 members on the original Prop 215 members list back in 1996. And so it just progressing my education when I got out of the Marine Corps and figuring out how cannabis was helping me alleviate my medical conditions, and seeing how it was helping other people, just kind of transitioned and made it a very easy pivot for me to get into the cannabis community and start to share that knowledge with people. So I started in the legal cannabis community in 2010 at Harborside. I was there for about 6 years. I ran an extraction facility up in Oregon for a little bit over a year, and I've been with Herbs Collective in San Jose for about 6 months. So
beautiful. Sorry about that. I was taking a nice rip. Hey, so obviously you've been around this industry for a very long time, worked at Harborside, growing up with parents that were open to cannabis. This is a little bit different than most of the people I interview. Some of them actually don't even know that their kids are working in the cannabis industry. So one of the things that I've noticed with my own children is that I thought I would be the cool dad with cannabis, but in actuality, my kids kind of think cannabis isn't that cool because dad does it all the time. Did you have anything like that when you were growing up?
It was, I wouldn't say that route. I had exposure to cannabis at a very young age, so seeing how my family members acted with it around and whatnot, I didn't really look at it as a negative stigma like some of my friends did. So I wouldn't say that it got me into cannabis at a younger age, but it definitely I wasn't looking at it as a negative thing like some of my friends were. So.
Oh yeah, actually, I think maybe you misunderstood my question. Was actually my kids. It's not that they look at it negatively. They just, it's like when they see their parents doing it, they're like, oh, that my parents are doing it. It must not be like the cool hip thing. So
yeah, I don't think that I went that route either. I was like I said, I got into cannabis use at a pretty young age. I was a fairly regular smoker by the time I was maybe 15 or 16. So, but I didn't drink, and I saw my parents drinking a lot, and I kind of took that route in that regard, where I didn't want to be like my parents having like the social drinking, but the social smoking wasn't in my thought process.
Yeah. And before we jump into compliance, when you went over your cannabis career, it sounded like you started off as a bud tender and now you're a GM. Can you talk about some of the trials and tribulations of working your way up and, working your way up while the industry is shifting and changing at a rapid pace? That must have been really interesting to watch from your side of the counter.
Yeah, I actually started at Harborside as a safety officer, so I was checking IDs at the door, and kind of stood out just because my passion for cannabis and how open I am and talking with people. So they saw a little bit more in me than just somebody that was able to check IDs at the door. So I was moved to the sales floor pretty quickly, maybe in the first 3 or 4 months that I was working for them, and then I progressed into management pretty quickly as well, just because my solid background coming from the Marine Corps and having a very focused attention to detail and a strong work ethic really just kind of set me apart from some of the other average cannabis community workers.
Yeah, awesome. And then you got into management. Now you're a GM. Do you look at the floor space a lot differently from the time you were a bud tender and now to the point where you're actually GM of the dispensary?
It's a completely different picture.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's get into compliance. So, before we actually started, I saw you opening this giant package, and then I saw like a little tiny piece of concentrate in there. So, obviously compliance has changed the packaging game, but can you give us some pros and cons of what you've seen from California implementing these more stringent compliance practices?
Yeah, it's something that we were talking about. So this is a gram of compliant concentrate at the current market, right? Because it has to have, not only does it have to be in a child-resistant package currently, which is going to be changing, but it has to be in a child-resistant package, it has to be tamper-evident, it has to have 14 pieces of information on that little label there with a government warning and all kinds of really tedious tasks that they make all of these manufacturers go through. And then as operators, we have to go through and double check all of them because we're really held with the most responsibility because if we buy products that are not completely compliant, the state can come in and pull them off our shelf and make us destroy them with no recourse to the manufacturer whatsoever. So,
So pre-July 1st versus post-July 1st, what did that do to your inventory?
So we've gone, just moving backwards a little bit. So in 2017, we dealt with about 90 vendors. Starting in January 1st, we had to dwindle that down to about 28 or 29 producers that were coming in with all products from edibles to flowers. Now, post July 1st, we are seeing maybe about 7 to 10 distributors that are able to come in with actual compliant product, and even out of those people, like some of the larger producers that we've seen, the SKUs that they have available from the testing facilities where they used to have 12 to 20 SKUs, we might have 4 or 5 available. Today I was talking with my Cuba representative, and there were only 3 flavors of their chocolate bars that were out of quarantine from the lab. The labs are taking anywhere from 14 to 28 business days,
Wow.
where they used to take anywhere from 2 to 5.
Yeah, so 2 to 5, now 14 to 28. That's like a 7x increase if I've done my math correctly. And I was told that the percentage of things that are passing is much lower too. So not only is it slower to get it tested, but less things are passing. And I had read just really quickly, hopefully I'm not getting the numbers wrong, but now they're testing in parts per billion as opposed to parts per million. So, are these tests set up so that manufacturers will fail? Or, it just seems like the change from July 1st till now is so different that it seems like it's very difficult for people to be in compliance.
It is really difficult. One of the things, so the biggest issue, or the biggest change, I wouldn't say that it's an issue, the biggest change with the July 1st testing is the number of pesticides that they're able to test for, or that they're required to test for. And I'm all for pesticide testing. The one thing that I don't like, when I was up in Oregon and I was running the extraction facility in Oregon, the LOQ, or the level of quantification, so the lowest number that the labs can test to for pesticides, a lot of times is still too high for extractors to be able to determine whether or not they'll be able to extract that and still return a positive or a clean test. So we would require people to bring us flowers or trim that was already passing pesticide screenings. And then once we would extract that and concentrate it down to a hash or any type of final product, we would be left with a product that cannot pass the pesticide screening at that point, because the pesticides were still in the product. You're not able to purge those out, and you're just limiting the amount of weight that you have, essentially. So it's accelerating those pesticide levels past the level that they're able to be in. So.
Yeah.
That's one of the issues that we're coming with. Also, the number of samples that you have to give. So, it was through a couple different strains, but we grew about 50 pounds of in-house product, and we had to give about 145, I think, grams to testing.
Okay.
So we're getting over a quarter pound per testing now.
Wow.
And the prices are inflated, so we went from anywhere from $200 to $300 a test to now I've seen numbers up into like the 900 or more per strain per test.
How many grams did you have to give them for testing?
It was 100. I think it was like right around 148.
And that covers the 50 pounds that you guys grew? Or
yeah, so it went across the board between all of the different strains. So they come in and they have everything out, and they kind of pick and choose between small buds, big buds, large, just so they can get an even sampling of the products that you grew.
Sounds like they might be doing some smoke testing with that too, then, with how much they're grabbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it is quite a lot. So I don't know what they do with all of it.
And are the testing procedures different than pre-July 1st as well? And are those now standardized?
They are. They're a lot more standardized. The testing procedures that got me the most, so the lab actually has to come out to the cultivation site and sample from the cultivator's full harvest.
Oh, wow.
So we can't take it to them. They have to come to our facility. Everything's done by the lab. And depending on they can come down and take post-packaged product, or they can come down and take pre-packaged product. But if they're taking post-packaged product, they're going to be taking entire samples. So they're going to take if you had it sampled down into eighths, they're going to take an entire eighth versus taking smaller portions. So you might actually end up losing more total weight than previous.
Interesting. Okay. I'm glad that you corrected me. I had actually thought that the testing was not consistent from lab to lab. I know previously that each lab had their own kind of testing process, so you would see a wide variety of answers based on which lab you may have taken your product to.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
How about now?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, there we go. So, as I was saying, I'm glad you corrected me on that. The procedures for the testing are now consistent. I had previously, maybe incorrectly understood that, the testing procedures varied from lab to lab. But ultimately, I mean, this sounds like a whole lot of work or extra work for us, but, is the customer getting a much better product because of this?
Yes and no. I think that the laws have made it so a lot of the top level producers weren't able to get licensing or still fighting to get licensing. So I think that the consumers are still seeing a lot of those top level products in the black market because the cannabis community isn't going to stop producing just because of licensing. They're going to continue to produce as they try to get licensing. So I think that the products that we are seeing are a lot more consistent, especially with edibles. In 2017 and previous, the edibles were very inconsistently dosed. You could see something that was labeled at 500 milligrams that really, some of the independent testing sites saw come in at around 150 to 200. Whereas that aspect, you're starting to see a lot more consistent testing with those. But the overall quality of products, I think is about the same.
Okay. Well, I'm very familiar with those 500 milligram, 100 milligram edibles, and now I feel slightly less proud. I ate a 500 milligram. I was able to handle it. Now I just realized I can handle 150 or 200, which is kind of like the ballpark of my upper threshold anyways, but that's good to know. Alright, so what about on the packaging side? I mean, I'm sure the customers love the new packaging, but for someone like me that likes to recycle, that likes to compost, that likes to treat Mother Earth well, I just can't help but think this packaging is just over the top. I never remembered like little kids like getting into people's stashes before, so, I mean, now I understand the child resistant, but I'm just seeing what to me looks like excess. But, from your perspective, what do you think?
It is definitely excessive. The big thing is the changing of the regulations pertaining to packaging. So after January 1st, the state required all products to be put into child-resistant packaging before they made it to the retailer. Until July, they allowed for child-resistant exit bags to be used in place of the CRP packaging. But after July 1st, they've actually made it so all items have to come in their individual child-resistant packaging.
Okay.
The proposed regulations that were just released by the state on the 13th of July now go back to just the child-resistant exit bag and do not mention individual child-resistant packaging whatsoever for an item-by-item basis.
Okay.
So,
Is that definitive? Is that definitive, or is there room for interpretation for that? And I guess I'm asking because we are going through some packaging as well, and we had been operating under the paradigm of everything needs to be child resistant, and if it doesn't need to be, obviously there's massive packaging savings that we can reduce it by getting rid of, a piece of plastic that locks this device together.
Yeah, so that is one of the things that a lot of the operators and producers are going to be bringing to the table for the August 7th public comments hearing with the BCC in Oakland. I've been going to a study group with a lot of other operators at Magnolia Wellness where we're going over a lot of the regulations and coming to a consensus on what they mean and what type of interpretations the state is trying to impose. And we've come to the conclusion, at least the operators that are in those meetings, that the CRP packaging, if these proposed regulations do become finalized regulations, will not be a requirement for producers. It will only be a requirement at a retail level for exit packaging. The exit packages will have to be child resistant, but no other packages will. So
beautiful. You
yeah.
wouldn't believe how much harder it is to design something that is eco-friendly but looks beautiful when it has to be child resistant.
At the same time, the state was very irresponsible coming in mid-July with these regulation changes, because a lot of companies have spent $100,000, upwards of $1 million changing their packaging to make sure that they were compliant with these regulations, and now all of that has been done away with. So the back and forth that the state is putting out is something that as operators, we really need to have stopped, because we're trying as hard as we can to abide by these regulations, and they seem to be changing on a daily or weekly basis.
Yeah, and, on top of that, we have other proof points out there of what other states have done that have worked. It's not like this is brand new. And I think for me, that's kind of been the frustrating thing was, there are proof points that you could look to in the past of mistakes that were, that you could have avoided and just kind of expedited things. And actually I don't want to call them out by name, but I was at a recent speech or a recent event where the person giving the speech almost reveled in the fact that how little she knew and that we all had to learn together and put it together. And she got a standing ovation. I think I was the only one sitting going, she just said it was good that she was ignorant, and that that she worked with the community to come up with things that the community wanted. But I was like, we could have just, instead of starting at the 0-yard line, we could have started at the 50-yard line. We didn't need to just rehash all the earlier stuff. So, okay, well, I don't want to sound all doom and gloom. Why don't we talk about some funner stuff, like what are some of the new products that you've seen and packaging that you've seen that you really like that, you think is worthwhile to let people to know about?
Man, the coolest package I think I've seen is Kiva's new package. Kiva has this, I wish I had one on me. So Kiva has their traditional, like the cardboard box that has their stickers on it,
yep,
and has all of the information. So when they were forced to go into a child-resistant bag, they were having some issues finding packaging that met their standards. So they actually were using like the white CRP exit bags, and they were just putting stickers on the outside of that, and they were putting their chocolate bar inside the bag, and that's how they were distributing it to the retailers. But then they found this really cool box that looks just like their actual box, that you have to squeeze one side and pull the bar out, and it like releases a carrier or a carriage that they put their actual chocolate bar into. So then if you only have a portion of the bar, you can slide it back in, and it remains child-proof through its entirety. So that was really cool. Some of the flowers, I really like the way that flowers are displayed in glass jars. So like the Corova jars that they came out with look really nice.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and just real quick, not to interrupt you, but Joshua Lee Hoffman said, I met Nick last Saturday at Meadow. So I don't know if you remember Josh Hoffman from Spark, but he said he met you at Meadow last Saturday, and maybe we could open it up to the people watching. If they have any questions, feel free to send in your questions for Nick, and I'll be sure to relay them to Nick. In the meantime, while I wait for the questions, why don't I ask him some of the questions I wanted to ask, which is...
Real quick, Sabu, one thing that I'd like to focus on is, we keep making these regulations specific to cannabis, right? And the regulators really need to start looking at cannabis as a recreational stimulant, just like alcohol and tobacco, and start to change some of these regulations, especially towards packaging and labeling, to reflect on some of the other recreational stimulants that are out there that, they're requiring us to go above and beyond for something that is not nearly as harmful as those two substances that I just spoke on. And, it just doesn't make any sense to me to require a new industry that is relatively safe to jump through all of these hoops when alcohol and tobacco kill people on a daily basis, and You can get those on the street corner with just cellophane wrapped around it, and it just the disparity is just way off in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And quite honestly, like I agree with you 100%, and I'm willing even to like go much further than what you just said, which is I believe cannabis should be in every person's life. Every adult should be consuming some form of phytocannabinoids to help balance out their endocannabinoid system. It'll help manage their stress levels. It'll help manage their cortisol. It'll help manage their appetite. It will help them be more present. And ultimately, what we need to do is teach people how to properly use cannabis. I know for a lot of my younger cousins, they read things like, oh, you could never overdose on cannabis. So their interpretation of that is I could just smoke all day and, just enjoy myself. And I don't want to sound like a hypocrite because I spent a few years in my 20s just doing that. But that was before I learned how to use the plant appropriately and to show gratitude to the plant for what it is and how powerful it is and how it could really change people's lives. And just watching how quickly cannabis has changed the public perception of cannabis over the last few years, where so many people are accepting cannabis because they've seen the not just medicinal benefit, but I like to say like the holistic health wellness benefit of it, psychologically, physiologically, and I would even go further to say sexually and spiritually as well. And these plants, cannabis in particular, I really do think that it's funny that there's all this compliance around it because it really should be shared more, in my opinion. And I think that people that know how to use cannabis properly, like myself, like you, we've discovered the secret of something that is natural, that helps us navigate and enjoy this life experience a whole lot more. And as I say, like not tobacco, but alcohol. Alcohol is awesome. It helps you tune out. You could have gotten fired on Friday afternoon, drink a ton, and go party Friday night, And if that happened with cannabis, and you smoked right after you got fired, you'd probably really think, I'm a piece of shit for getting fired. I gotta get better, right? So, to me, like these compliance, these excise tax, it is just silly because cannabis is such a positive thing, and we gotta make sure that we teach people how to utilize it properly.
Oh yeah, man. If you look at how, thank you for bringing up the taxes. If you look at how alcohol's taxed in the state of California, alcohol's taxed at 60 cents a gallon to manufacture distilled spirits. So any hard alcohol, whiskey, vodka, anything like that that's produced in the state is taxed at 60 cents a gallon, where we're taxed at, I believe it's a dollar and some change at the wet weight 2 hours after harvest, and then we're charged $2 and some change for the dry trim and $7 and some change for the dry flower. So there's 3 separate taxes that are charged on just the cultivation, one of them being the wet weight of the plant.
The wet weight of the plant. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And then on top of that, to get that to market, there's 2 different excise tax formulations. So there's the 15% of, basically it's 15% of the sale, so it's 24% of wholesale, or on non-arm's length transactions. So if, like on a product that I grow myself, they take 15% of the full retail value. So we ended up paying close to $2,000 a pound to the state in taxes for each pound that we grew ourselves.
Wow. But the black market must be exploding. Well,
it's crazy.
I had actually read, I read in the paper that for every % increase in the excise tax, the local municipalities factor in that they're growing the black market by 1%. So, just understanding that and understanding the logic and philosophy behind that, it kind of makes me scratch my head, when we're thinking about how these policies are being made and who's actually benefiting from them.
Yeah, it seems like the only people benefiting are the lobbyists who are taking money from VCs and trying to enact laws that make it easier for them to get in the industry and thrive. And it's really affecting the small farmer and the small business owner tenfold. And it's affecting Humble so dramatically that we have traditional or generational families that are moving out of the area and trying to go explore other regions so that they can still continue to utilize their skill.
Yeah. So, how can we support the small, craft farmer?
There's a couple of coalitions that are getting together that are really only distributing the small craft market. But I think that the main thing we need to do as an industry is realize that the race to the bottom isn't always good. The race to the bottom it's really gonna drive these super farms that were brought in by lobbyists that didn't really fall into the original plot of Prop 64 with the 1 acre cap. And they're able to drive the price way down on quality flour, on not quality flour, but on flour,
Yeah.
And people really need to start to reassess what sun-grown is and understand that it's not always going to be an inferior product. And I think that's the main thing, is to really start looking at where your products are coming from and buying appropriately.
Yeah. That's good to know. And, I have been to probably 25 to 30 of these massive grows in my lifetime. And I've been to a bunch of small and medium-sized grows, and I have yet to taste, top shelf flour coming from these mega grows. But what I can tell you is every year they are making improvements. But for me, maybe it's just the hippie in me, but I feel like, just like I could raise 2 kids very well, I probably couldn't raise 20 kids very well. Like, I just think cannabis is the same way. There's a certain amount of personal touch that one person could give to a certain number of plants. And when they exceed that, quality drops,
Yeah.
And I think that's just a fact. And that's why I have some hope that these craft farmers will be around, just like there's like those small vineyards and, other small things. And actually, now that I say it, I'm like, all these things are getting gobbled up, and kind of panicking. So, well,
craft brews are standing strong right now in the alcohol market, and I think that's something that the craft farmer needs to look at and try to model themselves after, because I don't want to see them die, and the other connoisseurs around me don't want to see them die. So,
yeah.
One thing that I think is really positive, on the label, it's now required for the manufacturer to list where the product was made, and what company it was made by. So when you go in and you check your flowers, look and see who's making it, and do some research and find out where these companies are and what type of companies they're, or what type of ethics they have, and like I said, know the products that you're buying and really try to support those smaller farmers.
Speaking of small farmers, that was some excellent red Congo coming out from the Gold Seal guys out of San Francisco. They are a relatively small batch, and I do feel very blessed to have met different growers in my journey so that I could learn more about the plant. And I thought I knew a lot about the plant, but once you talk to a grower, you start realizing, like, all right, I know a lot about the plant for like a business guy, but not for a person growing cannabis, and
growers speak a different language.
Yeah. And actually meeting all these growers has inspired me to grow. So for the last 2 seasons, I've grown my own, and, just like my kids, I had a personal relationship with these plants. I actually felt guilty cutting them down and smoking them, but they also told me we only live for one season, so you might as well cut me down and enjoy me. And it was awesome, you know. And I started growing my own vegetables too. And the vegetables in our garden, I'm no master grower, but they sure hell taste as good as like Safeway vegetables. So I figured, why not do it yourself? And every year I'm getting a little bit better. And then just learning about botany, learning about how the plants intake nutrients and how they photosynthesize. And it is really just an amazing, you know, intelligent, conscious thing, you know. And I've always really believed that I think there is, just like we have the endocannabinoid system, there is a reason why we are really linked to this plant and why it's so fascinating for everyone involved. And what kind of rig are you using right there?
This is a Puffco Peak.
Oh, nice. So you got one of those, that's a Hitman attachment, right?
This is one of the compound attachments by Hitman.
Yes, nice. I've actually used just the standard rig version of that top that you had. And then when I saw it sitting on top of something, I was like, oh, I think that's a Peak.
Yeah.
Nice. Nah, yeah, that's a cool device. I was not a big fan of like the Dabados or those types of portable dabbers, but when this one came out and it had that larger surface area, I believe that was, you know, a big difference in why this one had, you know, much better flavor and performance than like those other handheld dabbing, you know, portable dabbers.
Their ceramic dish. I've tried a couple of the quartz dishes that people make for them, and it burns the flavor. Their ceramic dish is so perfect for this unit that it gets the. I use my silicon carbide nail on my regular D-nail, and I get better flavor off of the ceramic than I do off the SIP nail.
Yeah.
Which I haven't found many things that have a better flavor off than the SIG. So.
Yeah. Well, there's all sorts of, I mean, when it comes to this, I found there's a lot of weird different factors, like, you know, depending on the thermal mass of the SIG or the ceramic and how much it cools, based on the size of like concentrate you put on it, you know, like there's all these different factors that either allow it to maintain heat, or sometimes having a drop in heat's no problem either, because you want like the heat buildup for the terpenes and the cannabinoids to not come on too strong. And all of these weird variables affect whether you're going to have like a harsh, smooth, or tasty terpy hit. And, you know, one of the things that as a manufacturer myself is what I've realized is, you know, these things are far from a science. You know, there's just a lot of testing that goes on, because before in the past we wanted to maintain the thermal heat as much as possible, you know, but what we found is, you know, there are certain times with certain concentrates, just the ratios of cannabinoids and terpenes, where if the temperature drops, because there's not a lot of thermal mass, it's actually beneficial to the flavor because some of the terpenes boil off so quick at the hotter temperatures, but you want it to get back up to that higher temperature, quickly, so that, the rest of the cannabinoids could sublimate and turn into a vapor and you get a full hit. But it just gets really complicated. But the good part is, well, R&D is super fun regardless if you're successful or not. Well, with that said, you could probably imagine I've been doing my own homework and own testing on devices like this, so I'm confident we'll have something that will be the next evolution of what these devices should be like.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah. So, before I let you go, I'm always curious. Indica or sativa?
I prefer sativas. You know, I'm a big golfer, and I like to be focused and alert. And I think that smoking sativa dabs on the course really allows me to do that.
Ah, beautiful. And you know what? I think that you know, I know a lot of my friends love playing golf, and many of them, they actually think like, if you smoke before playing golf, it'll mess up your swing or whatever, you know. So what's the benefit that you get from consuming sativa before golfing?
You know, I like to maintain like a consistent level of saturation of my endocannabinoid system. So Especially when I'm out in nature. I think that's when I like to consume cannabis the most. So I find that when I'm having a very consistent round, I'll maybe take a dab maybe every 3 holes. And if I'm having a bad round and I start to focus on the game too much, I really won't smoke that often. So it actually helps me kind of just stay focused and stay out of my own head and just kind of enjoy my time out there, you know?
Yeah. No, I love the way you put it because that's how, well, you know, when I speak to the top level athletes that consume cannabis before their workouts or before competitions, you know, that's the consistent theme that I hear, which is it helps me focus. It helps me get out of my head. It just allows, or I allow my body to just do the mechanical swing that I've done 1,000 times. And when you're out of your head and you're not thinking, oh, I need it to be a few degrees this way, or I need to push through, you know, no. You just focus on the goal. You let your body do what you've trained it to do. And that's when you're in flow state and get the best results. And ultimately, you know, I love hearing other people share their story because most of the times when I tell people this, they're like, that's just you. You know, everybody else can't do this. And I'm like, no, you're just not talking to enough people. Or you've told people this, or you've told yourself this story, like, I can't do this. And you know, guess what? The person that says I could do this with cannabis and the person that says I can't do it with cannabis, they're both right, you know? So the story I like to tell myself is like, this actually helps me. And what I actually believe is that cannabis helps you get into your body so much that, you know, it's almost like if you're not used to like feeling a lot of stuff, you switch from being in your head and into your body. And I think that might be like their distraction. They're just not used to like processing through their body. And, you know, I think it's up to people like you and I that have had these positive experiences with cannabis to really help them understand that this isn't just something that you do when you want to just veg out and watch a movie. It's actually something that makes so many of life's enjoyable things like hiking, being in nature, drawing, meditating, anything that requires you to be present, you know, like cannabis. To me, it's like training wheels on a bike, you know. Obviously, you should be able to be present without cannabis, but I believe cannabis puts you in the present moment. And if people can understand that more and just get out of their heads of like, oh, I am feeling paranoid. Is everyone judging me right now? Is everyone listening to me? No one's paying attention to you, just like in regular life. Everyone's too busy with their own shit, right, to pay attention to you. So, anyways.
Everybody's looking at their phone. They're not looking at you.
That's the sad truth, and that's why my phone is upside down right now, so I could be looking at you. All right, my man. Well, hey, we've been on for a good 42 minutes. This is actually, for the people watching, this is, Nick and I we're Facebook buddies, and this is the first time that we've actually spoke face to face. So one of the things that I really appreciate about these interviews is that I get to talk to people that I've had a lot of interactions with, but, you know, just kind of surface level, like people that I know, oh, you know, ideologically, we're probably in similar places. He seems really cool, but getting to sit down and just listen to your story, kind of hear your voice, see your expressions, like, now I feel like I really know you, and, you know, the next time I come to your dispensary, I can make myself super comfortable without that little awkward phase in the beginning when you're just trying to get situated.
Well, I'll see you Saturday too, right, at the 420 games?
Oh, yes. Okay. So the 420 games, we might as well do a quick advertisement for the 420 games. So, do you want to let the people know about the 420 games?
Yeah, this is the 5th annual 420 games happening in San Francisco on Saturday. I believe it starts at 4 o'clock. Correct me if I'm wrong.
8 a.m.
I'm way off. 8 a.m. I'm sorry. And it's a 4.2 mile run, followed by a beer garden that's sponsored by Lagunitas and Harvest and Vape Exhale and Choose Love. Who are the other sponsors?
Dude, this is awesome. Hey, I promise you guys, we didn't rehearse this. This guy's just coming off the top of his head. This is why we know we're in flow state together.
Jim has put on an amazing show with the 420 games. I helped him out with the 420 Games golf tournament that we did in San Jose at Los Lagos Golf Course. I believe that was in 2014.
Yeah, I sponsored one of the holes there.
I remember you and my father made it onto the Mercury News front page. Actually,
yes.
You were giving my dad a dab. Yeah,
that was so awesome. Man. Setting up a dab bar on a golf course, like, I mean, I don't know if you guys could see it, but I got goosebumps just thinking about it because it was such a surreal moment to be sitting there, letting people come up to the hole and going, "Hello, sir. Would you like a dab before your next swing?" And I mean, the majority of people took me up on it. And, you know, I got to give it up to Jim. I mean, the 420 Games, like, a lot of people, when I say it, they just kind of roll their eyes. But once they go to the event and they see, like, how well produced it is and how it's also a family event, you know, bring your family out there. Moms run with their strollers, dads run with their strollers. I was on my electric skateboard last year, but that's besides the case. I did the jiu-jitsu tournament too, so I sweated. But I mean, it's just really cool. And what's also awesome is that it's just a really wide, diverse set of people. People that would never normally interact in regular life, and they're just all coming together because of cannabis, because of being healthy. And I think what we really need to start pushing is that most cannabis users are, I think, pretty healthy, you know, like it's usually the younger ones that are not taught like how to utilize cannabis that are just like, I'm hungry, let's go to Jack in the Box. And it's okay. I mean, they got metabolisms that could do it in their 20s, but you know, it took me a little while to learn that lesson. But once I realize that having healthy snacks along with cannabis actually gives you like an even better high. You know, like there's certain terpenes that I think are much more prominent in nutrient dense food than in like Doritos or Jack in the Box that, at least for me, subjectively always give me a much better high, and I feel like the come down is also like less lethargic and tiring too. And that's a little bit of bro science, but I've been taking pretty good notes with my own body. And, you know, I think the base logic is that, well, the more good stuff you put into your body, it all works together in like a overall system. So, of course, you'll be feeling better.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, someone says mangoes, and someone is agreeing with me. So, as long as one person validates my ramble, I feel pretty good that it's been thought out. So, okay, I did say we were going to say goodbye like 5 minutes ago. Then I started talking. Okay, last thing is there any last words that you want to tell the people that are watching that you think is important or not important, but just feel like getting off your chest?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I've been stressing to a lot of our customers since January 1st with all of these new taxes and all the hoops that we have to jump through as operators and as producers is, you know, if I have to pay a little bit more for my cannabis, or if I have to do 10 times more paperwork to be able to buy cannabis at a retail level, I'm okay with doing all of that if it means that we have people that are getting out of jail and staying with their families. And it's something that, you know, we need to be responsible as operators and abide by the law so that we can be role models for other industries and for other people that are not operating above board, and really focus on getting and returning these people to their families. So.
Oh man. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate those words, and you know, it really is, you know, despite all the things that we were complaining about, the fact that people aren't going to jail anymore, the fact that it's getting destigmatized, you know, these are just, as they say, growing pains that we need to work our way through. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a awesome interview. Like, I'm glad we were able to work out the technical kinks before we got on. And, well, it sounds like your dog wants a pet or two. So thank you very much for joining. And I know you'll be watching the next ones too.
Yeah, have a good one. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Talk to you later. All right. You there?